Nobody warned Marcus Cole about the rules until his third night on the job. That should have been his first red flag. He was 26 years old, 6'1", broad-shouldered, waist, the kind of guy who'd played linebacker in college and still carried himself like he could take a hit. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan, come home with a bad knee and a worse sleep schedule, and when the VA couldn't place him fast enough, he took the first job that matched his hours: overnight security at Westfield Crescent Mall in Denton, Ohio. The mall was dying. You could feel it the moment you walked in during daylight hours. That particular silence of a place that used to scream with life. Half the storefronts were dark, their grates pulled down, their signs faded or removed entirely. The food court still had a Subway and a Chinese place called Lucky Dragon that somehow clung on, but most of the anchor stores had packed up and left. The JCPenney had closed 2 years ago, the Sears before that. What remained were a handful of mid-tier clothing shops, a GameStop that was always eerily empty, a nail salon, and a Spirit Halloween that operated seasonally in the old Macy's space. At night, Westfield Crescent was something else entirely. Marcus reported to the security office at 11 p.m., just as the daytime guard, a heavyset man named Dale Pruitt, was shutting down his station. Dale was the kind of guy who'd worked nights so long that daylight seemed to physically pain him. He had gray skin and watery eyes and moved like a man walking underwater. "You the new hire?" Dale said, not looking up from the logbook he was signing. "Marcus Cole. Started Monday." Dale slid the logbook across the desk. "Sign in. I'll give you the walkthrough." The walkthrough took 40 minutes. Dale walked Marcus through all 3 floors, pointing out the camera blind spots, the emergency exits that sometimes stuck, the bathroom on the 2nd floor where a pipe had leaked, and the tile was still soft in one corner. He explained the patrol schedule: 1 loop per hour starting at the ground floor, working up. Then as they rode the escalator back down to the 1st floor, Dale stopped. He turned and looked at Marcus with those watery eyes, and for just a moment something moved behind them, something careful. "There are 2 rules," Dale said, "non-negotiable. Management doesn't put them in the handbook because they don't want to explain them. But every guard who's worked nights here knows them." Marcus had survived 2 deployments. He'd sat through briefings about IEDs and ambush corridors and the specific way light bounced off a tripwire at 3 a.m. He knew how to listen when someone was telling him something that mattered. "I'm listening," he said. Dale held up one finger. "After 1 a.m., you do not go to the 3rd floor. I don't care what you hear up there. I don't care what the cameras show. You stay off the 3rd floor." "And the 2nd rule?" Dale held up a 2nd finger. "The intercom system activates sometimes on its own, old wiring, management says. When it does, you ignore it. You do not pick up. You do not respond. You do not investigate where the sound is coming from." He paused. "You just let it go?" Marcus waited for more. An explanation, a ghost story, something. Dale just picked up his jacket and his thermos and walked toward the exit. "Have a good shift," he said, and he was gone. Marcus spent his first 3 weeks without incident. He walked his loops. He checked his doors. He drank bad coffee from the machine in the break room and watched the security monitors and thought about very little. The mall at night was oppressive in that low-hum way of all large empty spaces, the HVAC breathing through the ceiling, the occasional creak of the structure settling, the distant drip of water somewhere, in the food court plumbing. But it was manageable. It was just a job. He followed the rules, not because he believed in them. He was a practical man, a skeptical man, but because Dale had delivered them with the quiet gravity of someone who had learned their lesson the hard way. Marcus respected that. He'd known men in the army who gave orders without explaining the reason. And the smart soldiers followed those orders while the dead ones demanded justification. The third floor was off limits after 1 a.m. fine. The intercom was to be ignored. Fine. He watched the monitors. He made his rounds. He went home at 7 a.m., slept until 3, and came back. Easy money, he told himself. He kept telling himself that right up until the night of October 14th. It started with the cameras. At 12:47 a.m., Marcus was sitting at the security desk, halfway through a thermos of coffee, watching the monitor grid. 24 feeds. Ground floor, second floor, third floor, parking structure, service corridors, loading dock out back. The mall was empty and dark except for the maintenance lighting. That thin bluish glow, it made everything look like the inside of a fish tank. He was watching feed 7 at the main atrium on the ground floor when the figure on feed 19 caught his eye. Feed 19 was the third floor east corridor. A long, straight hallway with closed storefronts on both sides and a bank of skylights overhead, through which on clear nights you could see stars. There was someone standing at the far end of the corridor. Marcus leaned forward. He squinted at the monitor, then reached for the zoom controls and brought the feed in closer. The figure was tall, standing absolutely still, facing away from the camera. Dark clothing. No visible features from this angle. His pulse ticked up. He checked the time. 12:49 a.m. He picked up his radio. "This is Cole at the security desk. I'm showing a possible trespasser on the third floor east corridor, camera 19. Can anyone confirm?" Silence. The overnight staff was just him and the parking structure attendant, a retired postal worker named Gus who sat in his booth and listened to country music and was absolutely useless in any situation that required movement. "Gus, you copy?" "Copy," came the static, crackled reply. "What's the problem?" "I've got someone on the third floor." A long pause. "You sure?" "I'm looking at them right now." Another pause, longer. "You want my advice?" "Sure." "Don't go up there." Marcus stared at the monitor. The figure hadn't moved, hadn't shifted, just standing there 60 feet from the camera, facing away down the corridor toward the darkened anchor store at the far end. The old J.C. Penney, empty for 2 years, its entrance sealed with a corrugated metal shutter. He watched for 3 more minutes. The figure didn't move. At 12:52, it disappeared. Not walked away, not turned a corner. One moment it was there, a dark column at the end of the corridor, and then, between one blink and the next, it wasn't. Marcus rewound the feed, watched it again. The figure stood motionless, 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 and then the screen showed empty corridor. No transit, no exit, just absence where presence had been. Marcus sat back in his chair. His knee was aching. It always ached when he was tense. An old fracture from a Humvee rollover outside Kandahar that the surgeons had never quite put back together right. He pressed his palm against it and breathed and watched the empty corridor on feed 19. The clock ticked to 1 a.m. He began his loop. Ground floor only. He did not go up to the third floor. He walked the first floor perimeter, checked the exterior doors, walked the food court with its shrouded chairs and dark counters, looped back through the atrium with its dried-up fountain and its sad, leafless artificial trees, and returned to the desk at 1:34 a.m. Nothing. He refilled his coffee, sat down, checked the monitors. Feed 19. Empty corridor. At 1:41 a.m., the intercom crackled. The intercom system at Westfield Crescent was old, original to the mall's construction in 1987, a PA network of speakers and wall-mounted call stations distributed across all 3 floors. In its heyday, it had broadcast store announcements and lost child calls and the occasional piped-in Christmas music. Now it was supposedly inactive. The system powered down to save on electricity, maintained only in a vestigial way that no one had bothered to fully disconnect. Marcus had read this in the facility handbook. He'd filed it away. So when the intercom crackled at 1:41 a.m., his first thought was old wiring, exactly like Dale had said. His second thought was that it was surprisingly loud, a long, resonant burst of static that came not from the wall unit near the security desk, but from somewhere above him. Second floor, maybe. Third. He put his coffee down. He remembered the rule. He sat very still and waited for the static to die. Instead, it resolved into a voice, his voice. Don't look behind you. Marcus Cole had been shot at in 2 countries. He had watched a man die 12 feet away from him from a chest wound and had continued to do his job because that was what you did. He had held together under conditions that had broken other men. But hearing his own voice come out of a speaker above his head, calm and low and deliberate, saying words he had never said, undid something in him in a way that bullets never had. He didn't move for a full 30 seconds. He sat in his chair with his hands flat on the desk and his eyes on the monitor grid, and he did not turn around. Don't look behind you. The voice had been unmistakable. Not a rough approximation, not some uncanny near miss. It was his voice, At 3:15 a.m., when the silence had stretched so long it had developed its own texture, Marcus called Dale Pruitt. He had the number from the employee contacts sheet. He'd never used it. Dale had made it clear, when he handed over the desk, that he did not particularly want to hear from whoever replaced him. Dale picked up on the 4th ring. Who is this? Not a question. Cole? Marcus Cole? I know who you are. The sound of someone sitting up in bed, a lamp clicking on. What happened? The intercom went off. Silence. You pick up? No, I followed the rule, but Dale, it was my voice, my actual voice, coming out of the speaker, saying, don't look behind you. How is that possible? What is that? Dale Pruitt was quiet for a long time, long enough that Marcus checked the phone to make sure the call was still connected. You want the real story, Dale finally said, or you want the thing management tells people? The real story. Another pause. Then Dale sighed, the long, tired sound of a man who's been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Billy Harmon, he said. You know that name? No. Before my time, even. Billy worked overnight security here from 2003 to 2009. Good guard, dependable. The kind of guy who never called in sick. Dale's voice was flat, reciting. In March of 2009, the mall manager at the time, a guy named Patterson, found the security office empty at 6 a.m. when he came in to open up. No sign of Billy. Equipment was all running. Logbook was signed through 2 a.m. Coffee was still warm. Billy's car was in the parking structure. His jacket was on the chair. Marcus waited. They found him eventually 9 hours later on the 3rd floor. Another pause. In the old J.C. Penney. The store had been closed for about 6 months at that point. They found him in the back, in the stock room, just sitting on the floor. Not hurt, no signs of a struggle. But he wasn't right anymore. Dale's voice dropped. He couldn't talk. Couldn't recognize people. Wouldn't look at anything directly. Kept his eyes on the floor. He'd aged, they said, not like years, like decades. His hair went completely white overnight. He was 32 years old and he looked 70. What happened to him? He's in a memory care facility over in Youngstown. Has been since 2010. Never said a coherent word after that night. They asked him over and over what he saw in there. He'd just shake his head. He looked behind him, Marcus said. Dale didn't answer right away. The intercom, he finally said. You heard your own voice. Yes. Every guard who's been there long enough hears it eventually, always their own voice, always the same words. A sound like ice in a glass. Dale was drinking something. The theory, and I'm not saying I believe it, I'm just telling you what the theory is that whatever's up there on that 3rd floor, it learns you. It watches you on your rounds. It listens to you talk on the radio. And then at some point after 1 a.m., it uses your voice to try to make you look. Why my voice? Because you won't turn around for a stranger's voice. Your instincts kick in, you get suspicious, you stay forward. But your own voice, Dale let that hang. Your own voice you turn for, reflex, before you can think about it. You hear yourself speak from behind you, and your body just turns. Marcus looked at the monitors, all 24 feeds, empty mall, empty corridors, empty atrium, feed 19, empty corridor. What is it? He asked. What's actually up there? I don't know, Dale said. I worked that desk for 11 years, and I never went up there after 1 a.m., and I don't know. Patterson claimed he saw something on the camera the night Billy disappeared, pulled the tape, never let anyone else look at it. Tape's gone now. Patterson retired in 2012, moved to Florida, won't return calls. The figure I saw on camera earlier, don't. Dale's voice sharpened. Don't think about what you saw on camera. Don't go over it in your head. Just sit at that desk, face forward, and wait for 6 a.m. Can you do that? Marcus thought about Afghanistan, about darkness and discipline and the art of waiting without letting your mind eat you alive. Yeah, he said. I can do that. Good. And Marcus, Dale paused. If it speaks again, whatever it says, whatever it tells you to do, whatever it sounds like, you don't respond and you don't turn around. The line went dead. The mall breathed around him. That was how it felt. The building inhaling and exhaling, the HVAC cycling through its rhythms, the structure groaning softly in the October cold. Marcus sat at the desk and kept his eyes on the monitor grid and drank his coffee and thought about nothing. He'd learned to do this in the army, the art of emptying yourself out so there was nothing inside for the fear to feed on. 2 a.m. He did not do his loop. He stayed at the desk. 2:15, 2:30, 2:47. Feed 19 remained empty. At 3:02 a.m., the intercom crackled again. Marcus put his hands flat on the desk, kept his eyes forward, breathed. The static swelled, louder this time, filling the security office, bouncing off the cinder block walls, and then his voice again, closer now. as if the speaker it was coming from was not in the ceiling but directly behind his left ear. Marcus. Just his name. His voice saying his name. He did not turn. Marcus, there's someone at the door behind you. You need to look. His jaw tightened. He stared at the monitors, his reflection faint in the dark screen of the monitor that had gone into power save mode. He could see himself sitting there, rigid, hands flat. He could not see what was behind him. Marcus, it's okay, you can look. The voice was perfect. He'd heard his own voice on enough recorded briefings to know every inflection, every flat Ohio vowel, the way he said his own name with the faint stress on the first syllable. This was all of that. Every single register exactly right. His body wanted to turn, that was the worst part. The way his muscles actually began the motion on their own. The way his neck started to rotate. The deep animal instinct that said, someone is speaking your name. Someone needs you, turn and face them. He felt it the way you feel a sneeze coming, involuntary, building, almost impossible to stop. He slammed both palms on the desk. The sound echoed through the empty office. He did not turn. You're being stupid, the voice said. Still his, still perfect. A note of something entering it now. Not quite irritation, but a pressure. The feeling of a locked door being tested. It's just a mall, Marcus. Look around. You're in a shopping mall. There's nothing here. He stared at feed 19. The corridor on the third floor was no longer empty. The figure was back. Same position, same dark clothing, same absolute stillness. But closer now. Much closer to the camera. Whereas before it had been 60 feet away, now it was perhaps 20. Close enough that he could make out details. The particular way the clothes hung. The set of the shoulders. Marcus Coles stared at the figure on feed 19 and understood with a clarity that felt like ice water in his chest that he was looking at himself. Not someone dressed like him, not someone his height and build. It was him, the same posture, the same jacket he was currently wearing, even the same slight tilt to the right he'd had since the Humvee accident. He was looking at himself standing on the third floor of a closed Ohio shopping mall at 3:02 a.m., facing away from the camera, perfectly still. The intercom voice had gone quiet. He counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the monitor, the figure that looked like him slowly raised one hand and pointed down the corridor, toward the sealed entrance of the old JCPenney. Marcus yanked his eyes away from the monitor. He was sweating. He could feel it under his collar, down his back, cold and immediate. His knee throbbed. His hands, when he looked at them, were shaking with fine, rapid tremors that he hadn't noticed accumulating. He picked up his radio. Gus, it's still here. There's something on camera 19 that looks like me. A very long silence. Gus. I know, Gus said very quietly. I know, Marcus, I've seen it before. You've seen this before and you didn't. I've worked this booth for 4 years. I've seen it happen to 2 other guards. It's what it does. It tries different things. His voice was gentle. The voice of someone being careful with a spooked animal. It used to just make sounds. Knocking. Footsteps. Then someone figured out the intercom. Now it does the voice. And then it shows you something on the cameras to make you think you need to go up there. What is it showing you on the cameras isn't real? Is any of this real? Because it feels pretty. The camera image is not real, Gus said, firm now. If it were real, you'd have seen it on camera during your first 3 weeks. It saves this for when it wants something. The image is bait, Marcus. the same way the voice is bait. A pause. You know what happened to the last guard? I know about Billy Harmon. Not Billy, the one after me, before you, your predecessor. A beat. She saw something on the cameras, heard the voice. She made it 6 hours before she went up to the 3rd floor to see for herself. Another beat. She lasted one more shift after that, then quit. Wouldn't say why. Moved back. At 3:44 a.m., his phone rang. Not his radio, his personal cell phone, sitting on the desk beside the logbook. The screen lit up with a number he didn't recognize. Ohio area code, Denton prefix, but not a number in his contacts. He stared at it. It rang 4 times, 5, 6. He didn't pick up. It stopped. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. This time he picked up. He didn't speak, just held the phone to his ear and listened. Silence on the line. The particular silence of an open connection. That faint oceanic hiss that tells you someone is there breathing. Then quietly, "Why won't you turn around, Marcus?" His own voice, again. But different this time. Something had shifted in the register. Still technically his voice, still accurate in every mechanical sense. But the emotion behind it was wrong. Not the flat, coaxing tone of the intercom. This was something rawer, something that sounded almost like desperation. "I just want you to look at me," his voice said. "I've been here a long time. I've been here by myself. Don't you want to see?" Marcus pressed his palm over his left ear so he was holding the phone only loosely to his right, as if that distance, a few centimeters, would help. "You know what it's like," the voice said, "to be somewhere no one will acknowledge you. You came back from over there and people looked right through you. You know what that feels like. I've been here for years and no one will look." It was using things he hadn't said out loud. Things he'd thought in the quiet of his apartment at 3 a.m., staring at a ceiling, unable to sleep. His thumb found the end button. He put the phone face down on the desk. He breathed. He thought about Dale Pruitt's watery eyes and the careful gravity of his voice when he explained the rules. He thought about Billy Harmon, 32 years old, sitting on the floor of a dark stockroom, hair gone white, eyes gone somewhere else. He thought about the unnamed woman who'd packed up and gone back to Cincinnati. He thought about the figure on feed 19, wearing his jacket, pointing toward the dark end of the corridor. He thought about the words, "I've been here for years and no one will look." He thought, "That's the point. That's exactly the point." Whatever was up there, whatever had learned his voice and his face and the private, unspoken griefs he'd never shared with anyone, it wanted to be seen. That was the engine of it, the intercom, the figure on the cameras, the phone call. All of it was designed to accomplish one thing, to make him turn around. Because something happens when you look. Something happened to Billy Harmon when he looked. At 3:58 a.m., the intercom crackled one last time. This time there were no words, just a sound that was almost crying. His voice, modulated into something approximating grief, a low, keening sound that resonated through the empty mall and turned Marcus's blood to cold water. He gripped the edge of the desk. He closed his eyes. He counted his breaths. The sound died. The clock turned to 4 a.m., and then there was only silence. True silence, different from before. The HVAC and the distant water drip suddenly audible again. The subtle sounds of an empty building at rest. Whatever presence had been inhabiting the air since 1:41 a.m. was simply cleanly absent. Marcus sat in the silence for a long time. Then he reached over and turned feed 19 face up on the desk. third floor, east corridor. Empty. Just the maintenance lighting and the long, dark stretch of closed storefronts and the skylights overhead, through which he could see the pre-dawn lightning of the Ohio sky. He wrote in the logbook, "Quiet shift. No incidents." At 6 a.m., the mall manager, a young woman named Christine Adler, arrived to open up. She was cheerful and efficient and smelled of expensive coffee. She didn't ask how the night had gone. Marcus walked to his car. He sat in the driver's seat for a while without starting the engine. His hands had stopped shaking. He thought about Billy Harmon, 32 years old, white hair, gone behind the eyes. He thought about what the voice had said. "I've been here a long time. I've been here by myself." He thought, "Good. Stay there." He started the car. He drove home. Marcus Cole worked at Westfield Crescent Mall for 4 more months. He followed the rules every single night. He did not go to the third floor after 1 a.m. He did not respond to the intercom. On the 17 more occasions it spoke to him, always in his voice, always after 1 a.m., always asking him to look. He turned the feed of camera 19 face down on the desk and sat with his hands flat and his eyes forward and waited for 4 o'clock. He got good at it, not comfortable, but good. He told himself he was not curious about what was up there. He mostly believed that. In February, Westfield Crescent Mall was officially announced for demolition. The property had been sold to a development company out of Columbus that planned to build a distribution warehouse on the site. The mall would be gutted by spring. On his last night, Marcus sat at the desk and did his loops and drank his coffee and waited. At 1:41 a.m., the intercom crackled and then went silent. No voice, no words, just the static and then nothing. At 4 a.m., the silence fell. Marcus looked at camera 19, empty corridor. The skylights above it were dark, overcast night, no stars. He thought, just for a moment, maybe it knows. Maybe whatever moved through the east corridor of the third floor of Westfield Crescent Mall in Denton, Ohio, whatever had claimed Billy Harmon and whatever had sent the woman before Marcus fleeing to Cincinnati and whatever had spent God knows how many years learning to speak in the voices of the people who sat alone in the dark below it. Maybe it knew the building was coming down. Maybe it understood that spring was coming, that the bulldozers were coming. Maybe that was why it had been quiet tonight, why it hadn't tried. Or maybe it was just waiting for the demolition crew, waiting for new voices to learn, waiting for someone new to turn around. Marcus wrote in the logbook, his last entry on his last shift. Quiet night, no incidents. He meant it this time. He left the logbook on the desk and his ID badge and his radio. He walked out into the pre-dawn cold of an Ohio February morning and got in his car and drove away without looking back. He never went back. He told himself he was glad. He mostly believed that too. This has been a Hollow Dark original. If you're watching this in the dark, you might want to double check what's behind you.